This campaign is called Tough Times from the Heart, giving greater awareness around suicide prevention. And this is Jed Zimmer. Jed's a country guy, loves his footy, loves his family and his mates, but he's been through some very tough times. And now he's passionate about helping other people and to tell them that when you think there's no way out, there is a way out. Thanks, Jed.
No worries at all.
Mate.
No, pleasure.
It's good to chat to you. I think it's probably it would have to be, anxiety particularly, would have to be one of the hardest things to try to explain to people who don't know. You know, when they talk to you about it, how do you start that conversation with them?
You're right, it's one of those ones that is unknown for a lot of people, and I think just like anything, unless, you know, you feel like that's something you do experience, you can't have that, you know, resonation with someone.
Yeah.
But I guess we're fortunate that we're starting to hear a lot more stories of people coming out and sharing their stories and so forth. And I think that's great for the fact that it's opening up more and more conversations and people understanding that, you know, they are suffering from anxiety or any mental health issues, they're not alone, because it is so prevalent. But I think it's broad, what anxiety, the definition of it, I think it can be very broad, and that's going to be different for everyone. I know for me, it was certainly a lot of social anxiety, but, you know, clients that I work with or conversations that I had, it might be different for others. So I think it is very broad.
I think that, you know, one of the big things about that is that it brings an incredible loneliness with it, you know, and an incredible isolation to sort of say, God, what's wrong with me?
Yep.
You know, through my life too, is what's wrong with me?
Yep.
And how would I even begin to communicate that to somebody?
It is. It's you know, you feel like you're in your own little bubble, and I know at certain times, certainly how I felt anyway, there's no way out of it. It's something that you feel like you have to deal with yourself, and you know that in itself, that's just so self-isolating. I think that causes further stress from there as well.
Yeah, because I think, you know, you think, oh, well, look, okay, we'll go and see a psychologist. I think there is that feeling of, where do I even start with this person? You know, how do I walk and say, oh, I don't really feel quite right? You know, it doesn't work. You know, how do I even start with that person? You know, how did you go with that? You know, when you started to come out yourself, how did you kick yourself into gear?
It's an interesting one because, you know, it's something I'm open about, and I've seen psychologists from about the age of 7. I think Mum and Dad said I probably saw one in those early days of primary school, and I've seen about 7 or 8 psychologists throughout my whole duration of life, and I guess that highlights that it's not a quick fix, and it sometimes takes a bit of trial and error till you find that right connection, because exactly what you just said, I felt at times there that, you know, I was like, well, where do I start with them, or this conversation feels like it's not going anywhere, and that was a real struggle within itself, but I was really fortunate to find an incredible mentor and psychologist following graduating from high school.
Yeah.
And you know, it's certainly not a quick fix, but I remember just having that sort of just light bulb moment where I felt like I just connected with them, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to get something out of this, because there was times there where I'd dread going to an appointment because I'm like, this is just going to waste my time. Do you know what I mean? And I certainly think that's how a lot of people feel when they are struggling, or, you know, if they're told maybe we should try and get some help and so forth, they question whether or not they will benefit from it.
Yeah. And there's a bit of fear in that too, isn't there?
Yep.
Like, are we going to open up something here that I don't really want opened? You know, like, I'm sort of barely bloody hanging on as it is. You know, if we start kicking into something new, that's going to hurt me even more, or, you know, it's going to be even harder.
Yep.
Is that feelings there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's unknowns, and I think with anything, with mental health and so forth, a lot of these scarce factors and unknowns come into it, which I guess makes the topic and opening up about the topic challenging prospect for many people, I think, because of those unknowns.
And then even before a psychologist, even just telling somebody, telling a mate or whatever, I mean, what do you see as the signs?
Yeah.
You know, for people?
Yeah.
if you've got a friend that you think is struggling, what signs do you look out for?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really hard because, everyone's going to be individual. But what I've always done since, knowing some of the things that I was doing when I was at my darkest point and struggling, I look out for some of those signs in some of my peers. So for me, that was, there was a lot of period of self-isolation and losing interest in the things I loved. I knew, going to footy training on Tuesday, Thursday, which I've always loved, it became a real challenge for me. So there was periods of time which I wouldn't go. So little things like that. And if I start to, notice little early signs that my brother's not going to training as much as he was, or, he seems a lot more tired than I've known him to be, that's when I'll go out of my way and ask that question. I think we struggle because we feel like a lot of the time we need to know all the answers, and we feel like we should be able to help someone if they come back and say, no, I'm not right, or I am struggling. But I think it's just important to just be yourself, because we're not all psychologists. We're not going to have all the answers.
Yeah, and sort of just a little bit more caring, isn't it? Just a little bit more caring towards each other, which I hope that we're trying to fix. And things like social media and things have sort of, they're good in a lot of ways, but they've pushed us apart a little bit sometimes, haven't we? And we've sort of forgotten how to be together.
Yeah.
Listen to what the other person is saying, and then say, geez, they're not, that's not like them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something's happened here.
Yeah.
And we sort of miss how to do that a bit.
Yeah, you're right too. And I think even with the last couple of years, it's certainly made that a real challenge with, the lockdowns and so forth. But yeah, the social connectiveness, and you're right, with so much social media, and that's generally how we interact 95% of our days now, is through social media. And I think it's good because it can help us interact with others when, they're not in our town or whatnot. But it certainly caused a lot of stress in itself, because I think the skill of sort of emotional intelligence or, gaining an understanding of how to interact with others and have those conversations, it's just lost with the art of social media, I think.
When you were, you talked about, dark periods and being down low, what was that like? What did that, when you think about that, you'd probably be able to recall it a little bit too well for your own liking, but, what did that feel like when you were down there?
It was a really dark time, and as I said at the beginning, it was a time that I felt there was no way out of. I felt as if this was me for the rest of my life, and to be honest, just extremely really dark thoughts. And yeah, as I said, I just felt there was no way out. I felt that this was something that I had to battle for the rest of my life, and something that I had to do alone, which I guess I certainly know now is not the case. And it is why I'm so passionate about this topic, is because, those challenges that I went through for, I guess you could say, 6-7 years, with give or take some really dark times, is something that I feel if I'd had those conversations and opened up a lot more, it could have been different, and it certainly can be different for a lot of others.
Because there is that feeling of, this isn't going to pass.
Yeah.
This, like you say, this is me for the rest of my life. The feeling, one of the feelings that you can have, I think, is that, and I'd heard it described too, is that all the good things about you have sort of been scooped out, and it's just all the crappy stuff left behind, and that's all that's left, and all the good stuff has gone somewhere.
Yeah.
It's no longer a part of you. It's taken flight and left you alone.
Absolutely, and that's how I felt like I wasn't Jed for quite a while there. I just felt like I wasn't myself, and I still remember thinking back. I feel like I was a completely different person there, and throughout it all, I felt like I was living in two worlds. You put on this brave face when you rock up and go to school because you don't want anyone to know you're struggling. Yeah. And then the second I'd sort of get home from school, I'd go back to reality, and I'd stop that brave face, and I'd be upset and emotional and so forth. So yeah, it was a period where I felt
release the valve.
Yeah.
And just
yeah. So I'd get home and I'd have an hour shower. I'd just shut the door, because that's a period where no one can come in. You don't have to be brave, because no one's going to come in when you're in the shower. And it was just a period for me where I didn't have to hide anything.
And what happened in there? In that hour?
Yeah.
What was happening?
I used to have a lot of conversations with myself. I used to beat myself up a little bit, because I used to ask myself, well, why am I feeling like this? There's no need to. Because I guess I didn't have a clear-cut answer as to why I was struggling, and I was unsure. So I used to have those conversations with myself, and tell myself there's no need to be upset, but and then I'd get even more frustrated because I was having those conversations. So it was a bit of a vicious cycle.
Rolling around.
Yeah.
Come on, fix yourself up. I can't fix myself up. Come on, fix yourself up. And round and around it goes. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah. It was tough. Yeah. And so and that'd go on for, as I said, it was quite a long period there until I got to that point where I call it a turning point where my mum caught me in a really, really dark place, and I guess from there that was a turning point that I feel others don't need to get to. I think turning points are something that can really, really shift things. But for me, that was a turning point that didn't have to happen, I don't think.
That goes back to that thing of that loneliness and that I'm the only person going through this and I don't know how to get out of it. So therefore, you just don't even know, you get so deep into it, you don't even know how to say that you're struggling anymore.
Yeah.
And then you're losing that sense of self-worth, whether it's worth it even, worth coming out of it, and worth going on. It's bloody tough places to be,
It is, yeah. Just constant thoughts. Yeah, I feel like you're in a battle against yourself a lot of the time too, because you're right. Is it going to be worth it? Well, what do I say to people? And what do I say if they don't know how to help me and so forth? And you start asking question after question. And then you get to a stage where you're just like, well, no, you know what, I won't.
And that future, you think, people talk about the future. Hey, what are you going to do next? Where are you going on holidays next year? Where are you, when are you going to uni? What are you going to do when you finish that and whatever? In those dark places, you think, oh God, future?
Yeah.
Geez, I can't get through the next 5 minutes without, let alone being able to think that far down the track. The whole concept of the future changes, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, absolutely. And you're spot on there. One day at a time was a huge task, let alone trying to think. And I think even that, the idea of the future causes a lot of stress in itself. I think especially for me, because it was a period of time where, you're starting to think about graduating high school and what to do next. And a lot of people, it's a tough time because, some people are not sure if they want to go off to university, and there's so many unknowns, and that causes a lot of stress in myself, and then you get your parents and peers and so forth asking, well, what are you going to do? And I remember thinking, well, hang on, I'd love to wake up tomorrow and feel better, let alone trying to think what I'm doing in 5 years' time.
Yep. Yeah. Get rid of this crap would be a nice start. And also, I think that concept of the future is, well, what if the future means I feel like this in 6 months? And what if I feel like this in 12 months? And I guess then that question rolls in, what's the bloody point? What's the point of it then?
Yeah,
if that's the way it's going to be.
And they were questions that, I'm open in saying that I ask myself, frequently. And I'd have periods, certainly plenty of periods of time where I'd start to doubt what's the point of it then. If I'm going to feel like this, or what's the point of even thinking about work in the future or so forth, because I couldn't see the value if I was going to be feeling like that, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
That's a pretty awful place to be. When someone talks to you and approaches you, when you do your talks and you're opening up, and they say something similar to you like that, what's the first step? Where do you take them from there?
It's tough because, as I said, we sometimes feel like we need to have all the answers, it's something that I've quickly had to learn, that you don't need to know all the answers, because it's just no one will have every single answer. But I always then ask, do you want to have a conversation? Because I think that's just the simple thing to just ask, because they might want to have that conversation with you, or they might not. They just might want you to know that they are struggling, so you can start to look out for them a little bit more. So I think always ask that question. And in terms of that, asking the question, it's something that I've rephrased a little bit in the term of, with Are You OK Day and so forth. Everyone goes out of the way and asks that question on that day. But I've actually rephrased it in the past year, and I put really at the end of that sentence and ask, how are you really? Because I know for me, well and good, if someone asks me, oh, how are you? It's something you quickly want to shut down the conversation and just go, yeah, I'm fine. Or,
but in Australia, the way we talk, we don't stick around for the answer. How are you, mate? And you walk down the thing. So you're not.
Yeah. And it's honestly something that since putting that one word on at the end of the conversation, I feel like I've had probably 50 to 100 more conversations this past year just by purely doing that. Because the person stops to think and go, well, hang on, how am I really? And it's something that takes more thought to actually give an answer to. And if someone is in that period having to answer that and they are struggling, it's generally it's going to open up that conversation a lot more. And then, just as I said, not having all the answers, so just asking them if it's something they want to talk about, letting them know that you're more than happy to have that conversation with them, and then just helping them understand that it's not something that they ever have to do alone, because there is so much support out there that a lot of the time we're not even well aware of ourselves.
And I think too, we drive ourselves towards alcohol and drugs pretty quickly too, in those kind of, at those times, people really jump into that, and that sort of masks it and can sort of carry you along for a little while. It's obviously not the solution and doesn't work out well, but it does carry people along a bit. Is that's something you keep an eye out for people? Yeah, it is, absolutely. And it was, that was certainly, as I said, with that brave face and, constantly trying to master these things. And for me, it was a lot of social anxiety, and alcohol was one. I certainly wasn't to a state with alcohol or anything where it was really bad, but I certainly, given I had a lot of this social anxiety and I was worried about what others would be thinking or how I'd act, I certainly used it as a bit of a mask for a period of time there. And you're right, looking out for those little signs in just your others, in your peers and whoever it might be, so it can just, it might start that conversation. How do you go with social anxiety now?
I think it's something that will be with me for the rest of my life. And I have a lot of people now say to me, "Geez, it must be good that your mental health and all that's like you just passed.
You're cured. Well done. Here's your certificate."
Yeah. And I sort of I don't scrunch my face, but I just sort of sit in it. It's not the case. It's something that it'll be with me for the rest of my life, and I think mental health will be with us all for the rest of our life. I'm
sure that people have mentioned this to you before, though, Jed. Is there's a real wisdom that comes with it, with what you've been through, that you're then able to help out other people. You would not have been able to help them out without being that kind of guy that you are. So, you could, it turns around, doesn't it? Instead of saying, well, social anxiety is an anchor for me, it's actually pushed me to be able to be that guy and to help other people. And what you're doing at the moment, helping hundreds, thousands of people.
You're right. I think to this day it's a weird thing to say, but I think it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. A lot of the mental health struggles that I had in regards to social anxiety, and you're right, because it's stemmed this big passion in me, and I don't think I'd be half the person if I hadn't gone through this. And I'm not suggesting that it's a lot of these struggles. There's something we want to go through, but you're right. I think it's stemmed a lot of this passion and need to want to help others as much as I can.
You're pulling people out of it a lot quicker. And you are knockabout country bloke. Fit, play your footy, whatever, and yet you're admitting to these feelings and whatever, and it's doing a hell of a job for people.
You're right, because I guess that's that stereotype and stigma, isn't it? I felt it all throughout my mental health struggles. I saw myself as a young, fit, healthy male, had an abundant range of friends, and to be honest, peers, and since opening up, they've sort of said they looked at me as the upbeat, charismatic kind of Jed, and I guess that's that umbrella that people can fall into, and that's why I struggled so much, because I knew there was this, I guess you could say, perception of me, and I had a younger brother, so I wanted him to think I was tough and not the one who's going to tell him I'm struggling. So it's a period of this whole time whereas I saw those signs of weakness and so forth, where it's the complete opposite.
And we look at people. It happens all the time. You look at well-known people and you find out that they were struggling for a long time. And you go, what do you got to complain about? What's your problem, mate? You've got money. Let's say you've got women. You've got this. You've got. What do you need? Cheer up, for Christ's sake. And that, as we know, that's rubbish. Just doesn't work that way.
No, absolutely. No. It's there's no blanket of whatever you consider success or something that's going to make someone happy. that's just going to be completely different for everyone. No one falls under this umbrella where anything's not going to affect them.
How do we need to start talking about suicide?
Yep.
How do we need to sort of have those conversations and change the way we talk about it?
It's got to be normalised, I think, for starters. Even that word, probably up until 12 months ago, if someone had mentioned the word suicide, I sort of get a bit sheepish and, well, how do I react to that? But with suicide and mental health, the whole thing just needs to be normalised. Struggles and, a lot of the mental health struggles that people have, because as I said, I felt like it was just me and me alone. But to normalise that, if you are out there in that boat, you're certainly not alone, and that there is all this support that you can draw upon. It's not going to be a quick fix and so forth. And then, the same thing with suicide, where if it's the fear of, trying to check in with mates, because what if they come back and say, yeah, I'm suicidal?
Yep.
And then, we started to think, well, what do I do now? I struggled with, that's why I didn't want to check in with others who I knew were struggling for quite a while, because what the hell would I do if they turned back and said I'm suicidal?
Yeah.
But to, just to normalise that word, I think, I honestly, because I got to that stage, and I know if that word was normalised and I could open up about it at the time when I was really struggling, and then to have just a nice in-depth conversation, I honestly believe I would have felt better about that whole concept. So normalising this stuff, starting from mental health and realising that it's a normal thing. These struggles are not alone.
For a very long time, we thought if we talk about it, and this isn't going back decades either. This is very recent. In fact, it's still around a lot. If we talk about it, it'll encourage people to do it.
Yeah.
We know now. We're getting advice now from all different kinds of people. People have been through what you've been through, professionals. That's just not the case. No. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Does it?
No, absolutely not. No, God, no. Because I certainly know for me, when I had really, really dark times and periods and those kind of thoughts, that's why you stop yourself from having those conversations, because then that word's it might get thrown out there, which you're scared of yourself, trying to let others in on those kind of thoughts. But if it's something that others feel is a conversation they can have, I honestly believe that it's going to lead to gaining a lot more assistance and help at an early intervention, and ideally lead others to not get to that stage.
Talking about it as being cowardly or selfish or this kind of thing, I think sort of it's just leading us to a real misunderstanding of what we're actually talking about here, isn't it? If we say someone, they just, how selfish, they've got children, that just don't really get what it's about, do we?
No, I've heard that thrown out there a lot. And to be honest with you, I probably would have said the same thing up until I was struggling with my mental health. I would have questioned, well, how can that actually happen? Like, how can you throw away something like that? And I get so frustrated when I hear it now that if that gets thrown out there, that's selfish, or how can you do that? Because again, it goes back to that, I guess you could say, emotional intelligence, and you don't know what someone's gone through. And I know certainly, as I said, I wasn't Jed. I wasn't the person that I know I can be, and I am when I was really, really struggling. So it's pretty scary and powerful what the mind can do to you, and how it can take over. So I think any of those acquisitions and so forth, I think with anything in life, without being in someone's shoes or having that empathy, I just don't think you can make acquisitions.
You're talking about, you mentioned that if someone were to say to you, listen, I'm thinking of killing myself, what you were doing about it. I think there's also the concern that you might say the right thing and they might do it because of what you had said.
Yep.
So I think there is that kind of fear there for people. And I think, gee, I don't want to say the wrong thing to this person, Or, so we've got to try to find a way so that we understand how that works, don't we?
Yeah, you're right. Because it is that fear of, geez, if I say something wrong, what might happen? And that right there highlights how we feel a lot of the time with mental health and so forth. It's this woo-woo topic that we take a step back. I always relate it back to physical health, and a lot of the physical injuries I have, I know certainly, the second I have them, if it's a knee injury, which I've had plenty of, I try and rectify that straight away. I get my parents involved in the conversation, my peers, I'm ringing a physio straight away, GP going, what do we got to do about this? Mental health.
Yeah.
We just take that backwards step and go, hang on, shit, do I try and get help or whatever? It's just got to be broken how we perceive and the whole perception of mental health. It's no different to physical injury.
Did you find out who your mates were when you were going through all that?
Well, it's a tough one for me because it's, as I said, I held this to myself for a very, very long time, and it was only after a period of time. Oh, well, when I say period of time, probably 5, 6 years, that I started to open up about this.
Yeah.
And a challenging thing for me was to see how little knowledge they had of a lot of these struggles that I was going with, and the common response was, "No way, you kidding me, aren't you?" And that just showed that, one, I probably did a pretty good job of having this brave face, but just how much of that stigma that I felt that I'm not talking to my friends. So, yeah, and the response that I got was incredible. And I think it is honestly getting better and better. I know within our football club, it's conversations that we have frequently now, because we identified at the start of the year that as males, why not have these conversations? I know I thought as a young male that the conversations I have with my old man or my mates and that has to be about, like funny stuff, footy, sport, those kind of things. Not emotions, but why not? I guess the question I now throw out there is, why not? Why can't you have them?
Yeah.
So, my mates, they were incredible.
Were you a little bit even surprised at how good some of them were?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, because the reason I felt like I didn't open up to them was because I wasn't sure, one, how they'd react, and then, if our relationship would be tinted at all.
Yeah.
That was something that I was really, really scared of, and it certainly wasn't the case. It's gone the other direction. But it's not, I don't want to sugarcoat that it was, just opening up and then it was a real quick fix and normal conversations were had. It was certainly, it was challenging. They weren't sure what to say. I wasn't sure how to, for probably many, many, many months. But I'm grateful that.
But they didn't let you go.
No, that's right. Yeah, and I think, I honestly believe that, because we've all got peers, we've all got great families, we've all got, there's just always, whoever it might be, there is always someone out there.
There's a good point in that, though. I think in the mate thing, that it took a few months for it to come on. This is what I'm saying. It's not like they said, "Oh, bloody Jed, he's just too much trouble as a friend."
Yeah.
He's just too much stress to have as a mate.
Yeah.
They didn't do that, did they?
No, God, no.
They just stuck in there and worked it until,
Yeah. And I think a lot of the reason to that might be is because they've probably got a lot of their own struggles themselves. Because that's what you find. What I've found, is that, from opening up and having a conversation, they end up coming to me and, hang on, I've got similar struggles, and that highlights how prevalent this is in mental health struggles and so forth. But I always say one conversation is generally going to lead to another, and before you know it, you're having, 15, 20 conversations.
I went through a rough patch and was drinking a lot, and then had to give up. So, not had to give up. It was the right thing to do to give up, and I haven't had a drink for years and years, over a decade. What amazed me is when I gave up drinking and was talking to friends about it, how many, after about a year, for example, would come to me and say, "Can you give me a hand? I need to give up. I need to stop drinking." And then even 8 years go by, and someone would say, "Hey, listen, I know you don't drink. I'm really struggling." It's just incredible how many other people were going through exactly the same kind of thing that I was going through at that time. But it bubbles to the surface at a different point. It was a real lesson for me.
And that's right.
It's still happening now.
They probably wouldn't have had that conversation or that opening up unless you'd gotten to that stage. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And something that I've felt, and I didn't talk about it for a long time, but when I did start talking about it, that's when I started getting people coming up to me, and you'd have a few of the, "Oh, you weak bastard, not having a drink." You'd have a little bit of that early on.
Yeah.
But they were generally the ones that were coming to me later.
Yeah, that's right.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Oh, it does, and that's what I've found too. I've certainly noticed that exactly. That a lot of the time, the ones that would sort of just question, me opening up about how I was feeling, and even a lot of the stuff that I do with my work and so forth. Now, the ones who sort of start to second guess or have those strong opinions that are generally negative, they're the ones that I think seem to always come back, and then after a bit of guidance or some help or whatever it might be. So which is, it's funny how it works like that, I think.
But you were doing that, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You were doing that very thing. You were pretending that it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Or you were going to school
Yep.
You know, before you had your hour in the shower, you know, you were doing exactly the same thing, weren't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their way of hiding things, I think.
Yeah.
But whether it's mental health or whatever it might be, it's rarely that I think anyone will have something that's going on in the background that others won't be aware of.
Yeah.
And how that's hidden or how, you know, they might want to cover that up. It's going to be different for everyone.
What's good for you now? When you mentioned about, you know, getting help straight away, but you know, going to the gym, is it something? What sort of gets you when you go, look, I'm falling down here a little bit? What do you do?
Yeah, I call it a personal toolbox or a checklist, and this is something that I've developed for probably the best part of 3 or 4 years now, and it's things that I've identified make me feel better. So if I'm having, you know, a rough day, which they come up frequently, or, you know, rough periods of time, this toolbox is something that I'll go back to and go, right, I'm going to do one of these things. And yeah, you've mentioned a couple there. So, you know, exercise, I absolutely love going to the gym, or even going out there. And both my parents used to say, I'm going to take our dog for a walk. That's my exercise. And I used to sort of laugh at them and go, that's not exercise. It's got to be something tough, like going to the gym or running. But
you've got to be screaming.
Yeah, that's right. But I guess with the beauty of lockdown is gyms were closed. So I'm like, I need to find something to keep me active. So I started taking the dog for a walk, and I quickly identified this is something that makes me feel awesome. So if I'm stressed and so forth now, or had a pretty bad day at work, or whatever might have happened, it's something that I'll do pretty much immediately is go, right, I'm just going to take little Raph, which is the dog, take him for a walk. So exercise, I think it's really important to play around with it, because it's going to be this toolbox that I now talk to a lot of. It's going to be individual. What works for you might be different to me. I think a few very broad ones that generally work for a lot. You know, your exercise, doing all the right things, your sleep, your nutrition, because I think the nutrition's probably underestimated. And I actually focus a lot on that with myself, because they now know with the gut-brain connection is if your gut's off, generally your brain's going to be off too. It's huge. And I notice it, like if I'm anxious about something, my gut starts to play up, and vice versa. If I'm not eating right and, you know, I've got some gut issues, I'm a lot more anxious and stressed. So I actually focus on that a lot. And then, it's things like journaling. I love doing, you know, a gratitude practice in the morning. And then end of the day too, just asking myself the little things that, what was good about today? Because it's very easy to just go through the motion of a cycle where one day goes by and we go into the next. It's just a cycle. But until I've found that, you know, actually just sitting there for that moment at the end of the day and just thinking about a few of those things, you honestly, it just goes by.
I think some people, you know, say, look, I can't meditate. It's just too boring. It's whatever. You know, you talk about that gratitude practice and then looking back on the day and whatever. That's meditation. I mean, and it's a short thing, you know. But I agree with you about the gratitude thing. I try to do that myself. You stop and you say, you know.
Yeah.
And pick one thing. Don't pick a dozen things, you know.
Well, that's right. And you know, I reckon at early days, I felt like I was with that practice. I was probably writing the same stuff, like, you know, parents, family, whatever, just the big things. But honestly, from doing it for a couple of years now, on this morning's paper, I could have written down 5,000. But that's only going to come with practice. And I think it's the power. It's just incredible, because you just get more of an understanding of, there's certainly a lot of struggles and stuff we're going to all go through in our day-to-day life, because adversity is unavoidable. But gee, there's plenty of little things that we shouldn't take for granted, and there's plenty to be grateful for. So, and you're right with the mindfulness. I'm very similar. That I thought, right, meditation. This is something that I've got to do, and I gave it a go for probably, I'm going to say, 6 months, and I just struggled with it.
It's not for everyone. Is it?
It's not. And you're right too, because mindfulness for me now is going for that walk where I don't have my phone with me. It's just I'm walking with Rafi, and I'm not worried about what's going on with the business or anything. It's just my time. But mindfulness can be as simple as just sitting outside for 30 seconds and just trying not to worry about what's happening on your phone or whatever. It doesn't have to be meditation. And that's the beauty of what I'm saying here about this toolbox or checklist is there's no right or wrong answers. It's so individual what makes you feel good. There's no criteria about what that has to be, which is, it's powerful. But I think it's something that we should all look to develop. Because, as I said, there's going to be those days, for whatever reason, where it's a bit of a struggle. But if we've got stuff that we can go back on that we know makes us feel better, it can help us go back up in the right direction a lot quicker, I think.
How do you feel talking about it?
I get mixed emotions. I still get very uneasy and, I guess you could say, very nervous talking about my mental health struggles. I honestly believe that it's something that I'll always have those nerves opening up about.
Can I ask you why? Because I think that's a really important thing. Like, why do you feel nervous about talking about it? Because that's sort of the key to getting somebody to open up, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I wish I could have a really, really good answer for you. I guess for me, every time I do open up about it, I feel like something new comes out each time, and that it's just each time I do now, I find it a lot more authentic because I feel like what I'm not going to hide anything. When I was sharing my story, it was probably only up until a couple months ago that I spoke about. There was periods of time where I had medication, or it actually got to the stage where suicidal thoughts were there.
Yeah.
And I feel like each time the story expands more and more to the true extent of what it was. And I guess that holds a little bit of nerve in me too, because again, it goes back to, oh, hang on, is this something, should I get out there? How are they going to react? Do you know what I mean? And it's still, I get those thoughts still constantly.
And it's a social anxiety. What am I going to think of you if you say these things? Yeah, I mean, it's sort of wired into you a little bit.
Yeah.
And you're sort of learning to manoeuvre around it.
Yeah. But then at the same time, on the flip side of that is, I also feel, I feel a sense of, not pride, but because as I said, knowing a lot of these struggles that I went through, I know it could have been different, and I know it can be certainly a lot different for others. So the way I feel is if I can have this conversation and be vulnerable and put myself out there as vulnerable as it might be, or the other people, how they react and their perception, if it's going to help one person, I feel like I can go to bed at night.
Well, you're helping more than one person.
Yeah.
That's clear. I want to ask you this, and this might be tough to answer, but you have had suicidal thoughts and you have been down that path before. And you look at it now, we're sitting here and probably a bit colder than we'd like, but it's still a beautiful day in a lot of respects, and you and I are both grateful for lots of things. Do you ever think, oh, I'm so glad that I didn't do it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I'm open in that it did get to that stage, unfortunately, due to the many reasons that we've spoken about and the many struggles that I had. And yeah, look, I'm grateful that I did go through that really, really dark time, and it honestly got to that extent because my appreciation and gratitude for a lot of these little things that we have in our day-to-day life, I think it's been excelled now to a degree, because I still know to this day those exact thoughts that I have and how it felt within me.
Can you talk about that?
Yes and no. It's probably something that I actually honestly haven't spoken about a lot. It was, I guess you could say it was one of those things that I'd really beat myself up about, because I'd always go back to trying to tell myself that, hang on, why? Like, I've got all these things that I thought at the time was the success criteria, happy friends, family, sport, whatever it might be. I felt like I was ticking those boxes, and then it got to the stage where I had these thoughts, and I would honestly just beat myself up about that. Like, I can't do this to my family or whatever. But then I just get moments where it all bubble up, and I'm like, there's just no way out. There honestly isn't. So to the extent of it, I'm lucky that it didn't get to a stage where anything, expanded more so than just the thought of it. But yeah, I reckon it was probably about a month there. There was probably a couple of times that, it was a thought that I dwelled on for many minutes there, and I just questioned, well, hang on, if I'm going to feel like this for the rest of my life, what's the point?
Yeah. Were you with around your? I would imagine the answer is yes. That you were around your friends and your family, and they're off talking about how well the Tigers are doing or something, and your brain's just not even there. You're thinking, how am I going to get out of this world?
Yeah, and you feel like you're not there a lot of the time.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good way to put it. You're obviously there physically, but certainly not there mentally.
But you're, I don't want to sound odd, but they're talking about something else, and you're hatching a plan on how to end your life. Did it ever happen? Were you...
Oh, well, not to that extent. So I certainly know a lot of the times I had the thought process. It was times when I'd self-isolated. I was by myself. I remember one night quite vividly where I had quite a few friends over for the day, and you're right, exactly what you just said. Yeah, I just felt like I wasn't there. I was just so caught up in my own world about how I was feeling. They're off laughing, and I'm trying to laugh, but I'm not happy one bit at all. And then it was actually a close friend's 21st on this particular night, and it's approaching this stage where we're going to leave and we're going to go to this 21st. And as I said, it was a really close friend of mine, and I couldn't bring myself to go. I just couldn't. So I can't remember the excuse I made up or whatever it was, but all my friends have left. Both my parents went because it was a close friend, and then I was left at home. And this was probably the first time that I had a thought like this, and I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it, because it was just it was a horrible feeling. And that's when I remember I just ran up the end of the road, so got to the end of our street, and I sat there for about 2 hours. This is like 9 o'clock at night, pretty cold too, and just for 2 hours there, all thoughts are running through my head. Well, can I keep going? Well, yes, I have to. I've got my family. Well, I don't want to be upset for the rest of their life, because then they're going to be upset. And you ask yourself a million questions. And I was grateful and fortunate that my older brother, he ended up, obviously after a little bit of time, they were aware that I wasn't home, and that something must have been up then. So they started to check in. So he did a bit of a search just around, and he ended up finding me after a little bit of time. So yeah, the thought of that didn't expand any further than there. But
what happened in that moment though, when he found you? So how did that? Well, what did he say to you? What did you say to him?
It was probably the first time that he became aware of how much I was struggling. There was a turning point for my mother where she found me in my bedroom on my bed one day crying. But even then, after sort of mum became aware of how I was feeling, and that you still keep it from certain people, and my brothers were definitely.
But that night,
yeah,
there was something particular about that night, wasn't there? Like his reaction towards you that sort of pulled you back from it. And what was it? What do you remember him sort of saying to you though? And did he not say anything? Did he just?
No, he did. We honestly just had a normal conversation, and I think that was enough at that point in time to feel normal again, because he didn't. There's nothing that's jumping out at me right now that he said this or I said this to him. Like, if there was, I'd remember it quite vividly, but it wasn't. It was just a normal conversation.
You just talked a bit of crap, and
just
until you started to
and feel that sense of normalisation again.
Yeah.
And he was aware that obviously I'm really struggling. So again, if it's something that conversation can be normalised, that's what I mean. It does make you feel better. So that's all it took. Is just I sat down with him for about half an hour, had that normal conversation, walked home, and from more and more, I guess the peers around me, the more and more they became aware of this, the more conversations that I had, it did start to become easier and easier, because it wasn't something that I felt like they got no idea about it, so I can't let them in.
That's a huge moment, that, with your brother, I think.
Yeah, and I haven't thought of it, honestly, until today, of that being a big moment, because I've had a big moment where my mum wasn't aware of how much I was struggling, and she came home from work one day and caught me crying in my bedroom. So I've always said that was the biggest turning point. But you're right, now knowing how I feel, and that night in particular with my brother is certainly another turning point, I think.
Bless him for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's obviously recognised something in there, instead of just saying, "You're right, mate. What the hell are you doing?" Okay, and then take off and do it. No.
Yeah.
He stuck around.
Yeah.
And talk crap with you for half an hour until, So he obviously knew. That's really something. Are you closer because of that? Like, or are you? How close are you now?
I'm closer with my brothers since opening up, 100%, because I don't want to speak too much, but in terms of what they might be comfortable with or not. But, you know, as I said, everyone has their struggles, but they're more comfortable if they are struggling with something now to open up. And that was something as brothers, we never had those kind of conversations.
So the three of you now
Yeah.
sort of have this little pact almost, you know, that you can talk, nothing's off limits.
No, that's right. It's certainly the conversations we have, I feel more comfortable to have about anything now. And as I said, for a period of time there, even with Dad, talking to my old man about emotions and that, it's a really weird thing, and I still sometimes grasp myself. Is this something I talk to my old man about? But yeah, nothing's off limits now, and I'm grateful that, you know, especially with my younger brother, you know, because I look up. He probably looks up to me a little bit now in terms of these conversations. That I'm grateful that he has them with me frequently, and I feel really, really proud that he feels comfortable enough to. But I believe that unless, you know, I went through a lot of those challenges or so forth, who knows, he probably wouldn't be, if he is struggling, having these conversations with me. So that right there shows how important it is to get out there and have them, because it's going to mean someone else is, and that's going to mean before you know it, there's probably 30 others who then have, and that's 30 people that have been impacted.
You're a bloody gem, mate. You really are.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, mate.